mainstream news articles from around the world about what we're doing around the world and what we're doing right here at home from different states and places, it becomes very apparent. The United States is headed toward a direction of totalitarian control. And publicintelligence.net has come out with a report from the Department of Justice. Before the break, I was talking about the DOJ and how they've redesigned their website. They've taken down the American flag now. And they have called it a political symbol. So we're moving from what we've known as America to some other system. I think that's what we're really getting at here. The Department of Justice issued the Terrorism and Criminal Extremism Guide, ladies and gentlemen. Investigating terrorism and criminal extremism, terms and concepts. This came out just this past week. They say on Public Intelligence, in order for criminal justice professionals to effectively combat terrorism/extremism, it is imperative to obtain as much information as possible. Extremist groups often develop languages of their own. Some have created terms that are unique in the English language, while others have given new or expanded meaning to relatively common words and phrases. In addition, certain symbols, events, organizations, and individuals have particular significance for members of some extremist organizations, none of which may be familiar to an investigator or prosecutor who has not previously been involved with such cases. Investigating Terrorism and Criminal Extremism, Terms and Concepts is a glossary designed primarily as a tool for criminal justice professionals to enhance their understanding of words related to extremist terminology, phrases, activities, symbols, organizations, and selected names that they may encounter while conducting criminal investigations or prosecutions of members of extremist organizations. So we have the Department of Justice coming out now with this guide defining the terms that so-called terrorists use. Now, they include a variety of things that are used. Of course, they have the Islamic jihadists and their terms. They have the Animal Liberation Front and the Earth Liberation Front. They have different environmental terrorists. They have the Ku Klux Klan represented in there. They have various other terrorist groups. Different groups that really are so-called terrorists and, as defined by the Department of Justice. But they include a lot of terminology from patriot people, too. And ladies and gentlemen, we've been telling you for years. We've been telling you for years that that 9/11 is going to be used. The Islamic jihadists are being targeted today. We've talked a lot about how the Islamic jihadists, a lot of this terrorism that they're blamed for is orchestrated by the CIA. They're funding a lot of different operations around the world. Pakistan, the intelligence agency in Pakistan, the ISI, has been a funnel of money for years, but dating back to the Soviet invasion. And they have received a lot of money from our CIA and then turn around and build terror training camps in Afghanistan. The United States is funding the Taliban to this day. We've talked a lot about this on the show. And so I'm not going to rehash all of that right now. The point of the matter is, today it's the Islamic jihadists, so-called. Today is the Muslims. But now today, it's you and I. See, you got to be careful when you start allowing the other side to fragment us into groups, to divide us into groups, to turn everyone against each other. Because when you see that start to happen, it becomes much, much easier then to take that group and then say, hey, that group is a terrorist group. We don't want that group. We want to eradicate that group. So we have to be careful about falling into these psychological traps, because that's exactly what this is. I have read the entire report, and it's nasty. They lump us all in with everybody else, ladies and gentlemen, that they consider terrorists. And the point of the matter is, this isn't a time to back down. This isn't a time to get intimidated. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is, if you allow them to intimidate you now, if you allow them to back you into a corner, you're still not going to be safe. Because someday, somehow, whatever group you're a part of, because they'll find one for you. They'll put you in a group. Whatever group you're a part of, they will come for you eventually. So this is not this is a time for American people, all American people, to pull together and stand up to these little bullies, these little boogers, these nasty little creatures, these scum-sucking creeps in Washington, D.C. and all across the country, to stand up and say, we are not going to take it anymore. We are not terrorists because we exercise our First Amendment rights. We exercise freedom of speech in this country. We will take a stand against the government oppression. This is just insane, and it's got to stop, ladies and gentlemen. Pastor Martin Niemöller, I'm sure I might not have pronounced that right, but he was the one that commented about the inactivity of German people, German intellectuals following the Nazi rise to power. And he said, and many of you will recognize this quote, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up. And I think this is really, today, what we have today, ladies and gentlemen, is the building of a Nazi Germany type system in this country right now. And I think it's interesting, we had the Rockefellers, very involved, by the way, in Nazi Germany. The Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie, they were in the process of funding people, funding the concentration camps over there, funding the experimentation, the eugenics program of Adolf Hitler during that whole era. And, and the Bushes are involved in this as well. We're seeing history repeat itself right before our eyes, and the compartmentalization of groups of people. We can see this happening today. And the government's labeling people terrorists, marginalizing people. I want to continue with this, and then we'll get to the call. The glossary describes the word, and we're talking about the Department of Justice glossary defining what, terrorist terms and terrorist groups, the terminology that so-called terrorists use. Some are terrorists. Some are lumped into that category just because they're constitutionalists, ladies and gentlemen. And by that word, that word constitutionalists is actually one of the words that they mention in there. So you can't even be a constitutionalist without being a Department of Justice defined terrorist today. They say he says the glossary describes the word constitutionalist as a generic term for members of the Patriot movement. It is now often used to refer to members of the sovereign citizen or common law court movement. Sometimes the word constitutionalist is also used. This is the thing, people, that gets me about the sovereign citizen movement. This is the thing that many of these folks fail to see. These people are not going to follow the laws. They don't care about your sovereign citizen rights. They've labeled you a terrorist. And anyway, he says, according to Merriam-Webster, a constitutionalist is a person who adheres to a form of government according to constitutional principles. The Department of Justice is now apparently in the business of newspeak. In his dystopian novel on totalitarian government, 1984, George Orwell introduced the term doublethink, from which the terms newspeak and doublethink were later derived. Newspeak has come to mean any attempt by government to restrict or modify language. The Department of Justice is in an effort to further demonize a growing patriot movement, has attempted to redefine the word constitutionalist in true newspeak fashion. The word constitutionalist is now shorthand for the sovereign citizens movement. In other words, people who support the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are violent cop killers. Earlier this year, 2 West Memphis, Arkansas police officers were killed in a shootout allegedly involving a man and his son, who were supposedly linked to the sovereign citizen movement in Ohio and Florida. Prior to this incident, the FBI, an agency under the Department of Justice, profiled the domestic terror threat posed by the sovereign citizens movement. quote, sovereign citizens are anti-government extremists who believe that even though they physically reside in this country, they are separate or sovereign from the United States. As a result, they believe they don't have the answer to government authority, or that's what it says. They believe they don't have to answer to any government authority, including courts, taxing entities, motor vehicle departments, or law enforcement. The FBI wrote on April 13th. There's the 13 again, listeners. And that was this year. The FBI provides contact information for turning in people who espouse the bogus claims and scams of sovereign citizens. The Department of Justice prefaces its glossary by stating that the fact that an entry appears in this publication does not imply a connection to illegal activity, and then proceeds to connect constitutionalists to alleged cop killers. In addition, the Department of Justice glossary attempts to criminalize people who use terms like New World Order, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, and One World Government. Many of these terms, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, have been used by the elitists themselves. All you have to do is go to YouTube and type some of these in. Many of these people have used these same terms themselves, New World Order and things like that. But if you use them, you could be a domestic terrorist. All right, time's going by very quick. I'm spending more time on this than I intended to, but I can't think of anything more important, ladies and gentlemen. Why are we being called terrorists today? Why is this something that just won't go away? Why do they continue to beat this drum, ladies and gentlemen, unless they're planning to move us toward a direction where they deal with people? This is why we have to not cower in the corner, but increase our numbers, continue to educate, and demand of the public officials, why are we being considered terrorists when we believe in the founding documents of this country?